from fragile wooden wings to the thunder of the Cold War's most powerful bombers. This is the story of Avro, a journey through innovation, war, and the relentless pursuit of flight. From 1910 to the dawn of a new millennium. Welcome to PhotoART History. In the early years of the 20th century, when flight itself was still a fragile idea, a young pioneer stood on the edge of possibility. His name, Elliott Verdon Roe. In 1910, he founded A.V. Roe & Company in Manchester. There were no guarantees, no established industry, no certainty that powered flight would even endure. But there was belief. A belief that the sky could be mastered. Early aircraft were simple, fragile, constructed from wood, wire, and fabric. Engines were unreliable, aerodynamics barely understood. Yet progress came, one experiment at a time. Avro's early designs, the Type D, the Type E, began to shape a future. Wings became stronger, structures more refined, control more predictable. By 1913, Avro aircraft were attracting attention, not just from engineers, but from the military. The world was changing, tensions rising across Europe, and by 1914, as Britain entered the Great War, flight would no longer be an experiment. It would become a weapon. War transformed everything. What had begun as a small engineering venture became part of a national effort.
In 1915,
aircraft were no longer built in
Manchester
workshops,
factory.
they were
Workers
produced
built
in
the wings of
factories,
formation.
at scale, at speed, under pressure. Avro expanded rapidly. New facilities, new workers, new demands. Thousands of aircraft were built for reconnaissance, training, and combat support. Engines improved, structures strengthened, production techniques evolved. The Royal Flying Corps, and later the Royal Air Force, depended on aircraft like these.
A new age of flight.
Flight
One
had
goal,
become
one
essential.
nation, victory.
Eyes in the sky, and a new dimension of warfare. But victory
would
come at a cost.
The war had tested us
And
all.
when the war ended,
Now peace would test us
the
again.
challenge would shift again. Peace did not bring stability. It brought uncertainty. Military orders collapsed almost overnight. Factories fell silent. Workforces shrank. Avro, like much of British industry, faced an uncertain future.
To civil aviation.
The focus
A
shifted
new era, but
from
the road
war
ahead was uncertain.
to civil aviation. Aircraft like the Avro 504 became essential training
The Avro
platforms,
504, training
reliable,
today, crush
simple,
tomorrow. From
widely
Manchester,
used.
Avro built the future.
But economic pressures remained. In 1926, the general strike halted production across Britain.
In
Supply
1926,
chains
the
broke
general
down.
strike halted production across
Factories
Britain.
stopped.
A nation paused.
Momentum
The future
was
delayed.
lost. Then came 1929,
Then
the
came
Wall Street
1929.
crash,
For Avro,
a global
survival would
economic
depend on
shock
innovation and
that
resilience.
rippled across industries and continents. Demand
Then
collapsed.
came 1929,
Investment dried
Wall
up.
Street crash.
For Avro, it was one of the most difficult periods in its
a
history.
crisis hit Avro.
Workforces
Through
were
adversity,
reduced,
engineers focused on
costs cut, survival
innovation never
uncertain.
stood still. Every
And yet,
design laid the foundation
innovation
for what was yet to
continued.
come.
New aircraft emerged, new ideas developed. By the early 1930s,
In the face of
signs of
adversity,
recovery
Avro's
appeared.
greatest strength was its people.
Across
Through
Europe,
skill and teamwork,
tensions were rising once more. Rearmament had begun,
looking ahead,
and
ready
Avro
for what's next.
was ready.
Avro was ready for the future.
If you're enjoying this journey through aviation history, take a moment to subscribe and join us as we bring the past to life.
1929.
By the
Woodstock rippled
mid-1930s,
across industries
the signs were unmistakable. Europe was rearming, tensions were rising, and once again, Britain prepared for war. At Avro, production accelerated. Factories at Woodford and Chatterton expanded. Design teams worked under pressure to deliver aircraft that could meet the demands of modern warfare. One of the first results was the Avro Manchester, a twin-engine bomber, ambitious in design, but troubled in performance. Engine reliability issues limited its effectiveness. But within that challenge lay an opportunity, because Avro's engineers were already thinking ahead. What if the concept could be transformed? What if more power, more lift, more capability could be achieved? The answer would change everything.
From Manchester to Lancaster, stronger, faster, far more capable.
In 1941, that transformation took flight. The Avro Lancaster, a four-engine evolution born from the lessons of the Manchester, powerful, reliable, capable of carrying unprecedented payloads. It quickly became the backbone of RAF Bomber Command. From night raids over occupied Europe to precision missions of extraordinary daring, the Lancaster defined Britain's strategic air offensive. Operations like the Dam Busters raid captured the imagination of the world. But behind every aircraft in the sky stood thousands on the ground. Engineers, fitters, riggers, workers, many of them women, stepping into roles never seen before. Together, they built the machines that carried the war to the enemy. By 1943, Avro had reached industrial scale. Production ran day and night. Assembly lines stretched across vast factory floors. At peak, a Lancaster could be completed every few hours. Thousands of aircraft rolled out from Woodford, Chatterton, and partner sites across Britain. Each one a complex machine, thousands of components, hundreds of hours of labor, and every one essential. The workforce swelled to tens of thousands, men and women united by a single purpose: victory. The aircraft built here would fly into some of the most dangerous missions of the war. And when the conflict finally came to an end, they stood as a testament to what industry and determination could achieve. When the war ended, the world changed once more. Demand for bombers declined. Military contracts slowed. Factories adjusted. Avro turned to new opportunities. Aircraft like the Avro York, adapted from Lancaster designs, carried passengers and cargo across the world. But even as production shifted, a new revolution was already underway. Jet propulsion, faster, higher, more powerful than anything before. The lessons of war, combined with emerging technology, would shape the next generation of aircraft. And once again, Avro stood at the forefront. The age of the V-bombers was approaching, and with it, one of the most iconic aircraft ever built, the Vulcan. In the early years of the Cold War, a new kind of aircraft was needed. Faster than before, capable of flying higher, able to deliver a weapon of unimaginable power. At Avro, the answer took shape in an entirely new form. The Delta Wing. Radical in appearance, but grounded in aerodynamic theory. It offered strength, efficiency, and performance at high altitude. The result was the Avro Vulcan, a machine unlike anything that had come before. Its first flights proved the concept: stable, responsive, powerful, and above all, capable. By the mid-1950s, the Vulcan was entering service, not just as an aircraft, but as a cornerstone of Britain's nuclear deterrent. The Vulcan did not stand alone. It was part of a triad, the V-Force, alongside the Victor and the Valiant. Together, they formed Britain's airborne nuclear shield. Painted in anti-flash white, designed to reflect the thermal pulse of a nuclear blast, they stood ready, always ready. At bases across the United Kingdom, aircraft were dispersed, armed, and fueled. Crews lived close to their machines, sleeping lightly, waiting for the call. Their mission was clear. If deterrence failed, they would respond. This was not warfare as it had been known before. This was strategy, defined by consequence. But even as the V-Force matured, the threat evolved. Soviet air defenses improved. Missiles replaced guns. Detection systems grew more advanced. Flying directly over a target became increasingly dangerous. The solution was distance, a weapon that could be launched beyond the reach of enemy defenses. Blue Steel, a supersonic, air-launched nuclear missile. Carried beneath the Vulcan, semi-recessed into its fuselage. Powered by a volatile rocket engine fueled with high-test peroxide. Complex, dangerous, but effective. It extended the reach of the V-Force, allowed strike without direct penetration. But it came at a cost. Handling the missile required precision. Preparation demanded discipline. Every mission depended on perfect coordination. At the height of the Cold War, readiness was everything. Quick Reaction Alert, QRA. Aircraft stood on dispersal pads, fully armed, fully fueled, crewed, or minutes away from cockpit. From alarm to airborne in just minutes. 2 minutes to cockpit, 15 minutes to takeoff. Engines would roar to life, crews would run. Procedures executed without hesitation. There was no room for error, because if the order came, there would be no turning back. This was deterrence at its most intense, a silent readiness maintained day after day, year after year. As the 1960s drew to a close, the balance shifted once more. Surface-to-air missile systems had transformed the battlefield. High-altitude flight, once the Vulcan's strength, became a vulnerability. Detection was faster, response more lethal. And so, the Vulcan adapted, descending from the stratosphere to the terrain below. Low-level flight, flying fast and close to the ground, using the landscape itself as protection. The aircraft changed. Camouflage replaced anti-flash white. New tactics were developed. Crews trained for a different kind of mission. More dynamic, more demanding, more dangerous.
To master of the terrain.
The Vulcan, once designed to dominate the upper atmosphere, had become a master of the terrain.
Soviet SAM systems improved. Radar cutoff as strategic balance had changed.
But not all systems could adapt. Blue Steel, designed for high-altitude launch, faced increasing limitations. Its range, no longer sufficient. Its fueling process, hazardous and complex, and its operational role, overtaken by events. In 1970, Blue Steel was withdrawn. A remarkable achievement, but a short-lived one. In its place, a new form of deterrence emerged. Submarine-launched ballistic missiles, the Polaris system, hidden beneath the oceans, undetectable, survivable, continuous. The nuclear role of the Vulcan began to fade, but its story was far from over. As the strategic role evolved, the focus turned to training. The Operational Conversion Unit. Here, new crews learned to fly the Vulcan. not just as pilots,
Crew.
but as part of a coordinated system. Navigator, air electronics officer, crew integration was everything. Low-level navigation demanded precision, timing, discipline, execution, without error. The aircraft itself remained
Training
formidable,
without error.
but
Discipline
now
created confidence.
its future lay in conventional roles, and in the hands of those trained to push it to its limits.
Hello, I'd like to welcome you here. Today is, we're actually in May 2026, and we're doing a series of videos for the Average Heritage Museum in relation to some of the aircraft that they produced on the Woodford site, which was operational from the early 1900s through to 2000. And over the 90-year period had a lot of stories to tell about the different aircraft. Today's focus is on the Vulcan, and which was built for the Cold War deployment as our deterrents. And when the Vulcans were produced, they weren't passed straight to the RAF, they went through an operational conversion unit. And today's guest is Joe Raimondo, who actually, through his 20-year career, spent the latter couple of years of his operational life in the OCU on the Vulcan deployment, and was present at the very last operational flight of the OCU with the Vulcan. So if I can just ask Joe to introduce himself and give some background.
Hello. Well, briefly, I was born and bred in Malta, but in '67 I decided to join the RAF. I wanted to be a pilot, but unfortunately a hearing defect stopped me, but I then joined as an engineering officer. Spent 4.5 years at Cranwell, completing my training, and then worked with the many different types of aircraft, because as engineering officers, we tended to move between aircraft every time we moved, every 2 to 3 years. So I started with Canvas and Dargazes. I then went to Germany, where we had Phantoms, but in the process, whilst I was there, we changed over from Phantoms to Jaguars. Then came back, did some short tours, went back in 1979. I was posted to Scampton, and I spent 2 years on the Vulcan OCU till the end of the OCU.
This series of slides, we're covering a lot of the history of Avro from 1910 through to 2000. Avro was mostly famous for the production in World War II of the Lancaster, where over 7,000 aircraft were produced between Woodford and Chadderton, and they were mainly assembled at Woodford, which was important for the history of World War II. And then the Cold War started, so the Vulcan was developed there along with the Blue Steel standoff missile. And then they eventually ended up in the RAF squadrons after going through the OCU to operate as the UK's defence. For many of you who may not know, what we've got initially was the conceptual design was between 1947 and 1952 on the Delta Wing Vulcan, and it went through testing and deployment 52 to 56, and construction and production through 56 to 65. It was then put into V-Force deployment in the late 1950s and early 60s, and as we went through that decade, towards the end of that decade, the operational role as a high-altitude bomber changed to become one of of delivering a deployment from a standoff missile. So the Blue Steel era was run through Vulcan at that period, and it was actually developed at Woodford, and we then it then was always in service for the quick reaction. Is it QRA? Is that the quick
reaction alert?
Yes, and that was really that peak readiness that was forward there. So these slides actually show some of that as we move forward. So we'd just like to have a chat now with Joe over a couple of incidents in relation to the Vulcan while you were at RAF Scampton initially. So that's really where this is. And just to remind you that the V-Force was really an operational period created in 1964 with the Valiant, the Vulcan and the Victor, with the Vulcan being the major component of the V-Force. And you can see here all of the RAF bases that were dotted around the UK at the time. If we move through to the training and the OCU's activities, we can actually see here how it operated, but if I can pass to Joe, who can give you firsthand what OCU did with the students who were the pilots and engineers of the various planes operated by the RAF.
Well, yeah, as an operation conversion unit, we had two roles. I mean, our main function, peacetime, was training the aircrew to fly the Vulcan and operate the Vulcan. We did have a wartime role when we then turned into a bomber squadron and joined the other three squadrons at Scampton as part of our role. Now, training students always has its difficulties, and sometimes it's little incidents.
And some of the little incidents become major incidents, as you will see. Continue. Joe's going to explain some of the things that happened in relation to the OCU, but you can see here some of the activities they had to be trained to do in maintaining the planes and keeping them in service as we move forward to ensure that the quick reaction alert unit was operational. So here we have a mock-up of the where the crew sat on the Vulcan in this graphic, which is available in the museum to look at, and as well as a cockpit and also a full Vulcan on site. But if Joe can just explain where the pilots and operational crew sat.
Well, as you can see, there are two pilot seats at the front, and there are three seats for the crew at the back, air electronics officers, navigators, two navigators. Now, originally when the aircraft was being designed, there was thought of actually creating a module of the cockpit that in emergency could eject all five aircrew. Unfortunately, that turned out to be too complicated, so only the two pilots had ejection seats. The other three rear crew had to open the door at the bottom of the aircraft, slide down the back, kick off the nose leg if the wheels were down, and then open their chutes afterwards, which wasn't as easy as it sounded,
as you will find out in due course. If we can we're just now going to have a chat about an incident that happened at RAF Scampton, I think in 1979, but I'll leave this all to Joe.
Now, sometimes you get one of these moments in life that you never forget. And one day, my line control and workshops were between the runway and the taxiway, and then behind us was the control tower. One day I was walking from my office to the front to our control, and I happened to look at the window towards the end of the runway, and much to my surprise I found myself looking straight down the intakes of a Vulcan that had started the approach, but having got to the end of the airfield, somehow the student had lost control and the aircraft had veered to the right. The instructor on the plane managed to quickly get hold of the controls and pull the aircraft out of its and raise it. But in the interim period, all I was doing was looking down the intakes of a Vulcan coming down at me very low and very fast before it went overhead. It's something that you never forget.
Eventually, the OCU for the Vulcan was disbanded in 1981, and on the very last operational flight, Joe's got some stories of that with the Vulcan, with the OCU at that period, even though it carried on operating in the RAF squadrons after that date.
I mean, the end of the Vulcan was actually very sudden, and we had about 3 months notice to finish training the few crew that we still had going through courses, and then we were going to pack up, shut down. And when it came to it, in fact, the day came when we had the last flight of the OCU Vulcan that was going to take place. And in that particular one, quite rightly, we had the station commander and Kevin Dearman, who was wing commander, the chief instructor on the OCU, were the two pilots who were going to flight that flight. So, at least trying to do something memorable, we got hold of a noddy train, which we used on public open days to ferry the kids around the airfield. And we used that to get the crew from operations and get them to the aircraft. And then when they landed, just for a change, we actually had a Rolls Royce lined up waiting for them, but we also brought out some champagne and managed to drink to the beginning of the end of the Vulcan, because once the OCU shut down, there were no more any crews going to be trained to fly the Vulcan, and that was very much the close of the first chapter of the end of the Vulcan.
Thank you, Joe. That's very much appreciated. One of the things we'd like to just show you now is on there was a tragic crash in 1975 of a Vulcan in Malta, which is Joe's home country. And last year Joe was on site in Malta on holiday and went along to the 50th anniversary of the Vulcan crash in Malta at RAF Luha. How do I pronounce the
Luha.
Luha. So I'll just pass to Joe to give some background what happened at the anniversary and what he may know of the tragic loss of the crash, which actually is reminiscent to one of the stories that Joe's told, which you may have seen, which was a problem with landing.
Well, I mean, I was in Malta on holiday, so I go down there to see my family and friends. And I happened to be there for the day of the 50th anniversary of the crash, which crew and one civilian were killed in the incident.
And it was actually this SM-645. These are pictures actually from Malta of the aircraft taking off and landing. We don't think it's the same day that it crashed, but it gives you an idea.
Now, I had finished a tour on the Vulcans before going there, and where the plane crashed was 2 miles from where I was born and grew up. So I had a foot in both camps, really. And it actually was quite surprising to be there for this commemorative event and see how warm the feelings were between the RAF delegation that had come there for the event and the local population, particularly the citizens of Zabar, where the crash happened.
This is Zabar here in red, and this was where the plane landed, but
Damaged the leg.
Damaged the leg.
Basically, it pushed the leg through the wing, burst into a fuel tank. The aircraft took off again, unfortunately, and then it actually caught fire and exploded in air. The rear crews died, the pilots managed to eject, and then the wreckage dropped on Zabar, and part of it killed the only local person to be injured. So that's the people. Vincenzo Zammit was the only civilian that died.
And the 2 pilots survived, who were the ones that ejected. As Joe mentioned earlier, the crew that were at the back couldn't actually, there was no real way of escaping the plane at that time.
And in addition to the 3 aircrew at the back, they also had 2 engineers, technicians, because when they went abroad away from home, they used to take a couple of ground crew to actually look after the aircraft whilst it's there. Unfortunately, they were 5 people were lost.
And this is a picture of the Zabar Sanctuary Museum, which is available if anybody wants to go to Malta, is on holiday to Malta to go and see. This canopy was ejected where the pilots came out, and it's kept in the museum now along with other memorabilia that's there. So that just gives you an idea into the Malta incident. Thank you. In this section, we'd just like to talk for a couple of moments on the only operational bombing mission that the RAF Vulcan went on, and it was actually the year after the OCU closed in 1982, and it's gone down in history as the Black Muck mission as we went forward, which was to bomb Stanley Airfield. So it's interesting at the period. Joe was still in the RAF, but when it went operational, you were doing a master's or something with the RAF.
Yes, basically when the OCU closed down in '81, I then was sent to Cranfield College of Technology to do a master's in advance of my next posting, which was going to be in a different job. Now, whilst I was there, I was effectively on a sabbatical from the RAF. but I was living on a RAF base close to Cranfield. So the first time the Vulcan had gone into action, I was out of the service. I had no direct link. And basically it was a question of in the bar at happy hour every Friday, trying to glean what I could from my colleagues there as to what was happening.
And what was fascinating about deploying the Vulcan to the Falklands was the sheer distance it had, and it had to go through multiple refuelings. And this little image here is the handwritten sketch that was done by an RAF engineer to actually refuel en route the Vulcan from, I take it, I'm not sure where they took off from, but basically it was how these were done, and that was training they had to go through at the OCU.
I mean, I wasn't involved, but basically I can understand that it got so complex because you couldn't just send a couple of refueling aircraft to refuel a couple of Vulcans. You had to send refuelers to refuel the refuelers, because those aircraft had to travel all the way and all the way back as well. So the logistics of it were just amazing to actually get one aircraft.
Yeah. And this is a picture of the refueling in general, but I think this picture was actually taken from Ascension Island or whatever, or the planes that were accumulated to cope with this task of being able to show that we could actually go into action at distance in relation to where we were. So that's it, and that's the final picture there, is just off Stanley Airfield after it had been bombed, to show the Argentinians that we could actually protect the islands. Well, thank you for listening, and thank you to Joe for his time to reminisce over some of his period and times in the OCU. We hope you enjoyed these interviews, and hopefully we'll have some operational interviews with some RAF pilots in due course. Thank you very much.
In 1982, the Vulcan returned to war, far from home, in the South Atlantic, the Falklands conflict. The mission was unprecedented, a long-range bombing operation launched from Ascension Island to the Falklands, over 3,000 miles,
Without the victors,
multiple
Black
air-to-air
Buck could never have
refuelings,
happened.
a complex, precisely timed operation. Black Buck. The Vulcan, once designed for nuclear deterrence, was now delivering conventional bombs, striking Stanley Airfield, demonstrating reach, capability, and resolve. It was one of the longest bombing missions in history, and a final, dramatic chapter in the Vulcan's operational life. By the end of the 20th century, the era of Avro had passed. The company, absorbed into larger aerospace groups, its name no longer active in production, but its legacy remained. From the fragile aircraft of 1910 to the mighty Vulcan, from wood and fabric to jet-powered precision, Avro had shaped the course of aviation, in war, in peace, in innovation, and in the people who built, maintained, and flew its aircraft. By 2000, the Vulcan was no longer in service, but its presence endured in museums, in memory, in the unmistakable silhouette of a delta wing against the sky, a symbol of British engineering, of determination, and of an era defined by innovation and courage. The story of Avro is not just one of aircraft. It is a story of people, of vision, and of the relentless pursuit of flight. In the years following the Vulcan, Avro's legacy did not end. Instead, it evolved. From high-altitude nuclear deterrence to the silent, persistent watch over the world's oceans. The aircraft that would define this era was Nimrod. Its origins lay not in a bomber, but in a passenger aircraft, the de Havilland Comet. The world's first jet airliner, reimagined for a very different role. At Woodford, engineers transformed the Comet into a maritime patrol aircraft, long endurance, high speed, and equipped with advanced sensors to detect threats hidden beneath the sea. The Nimrod entered service at the height of the Cold War. Its mission was clear: track Soviet submarines, protect the United Kingdom's nuclear deterrent, and maintain constant vigilance across vast ocean spaces. Variants followed: the MR2, refined and enhanced; the R1, dedicated to signals intelligence, listening silently to the electronic world. But not every development succeeded. The Nimrod AEW program, intended to provide airborne early warning, encountered major technical challenges. After years of difficulty, it was cancelled, replaced by an American solution, a sign of growing complexity in modern aerospace. Meanwhile, the British aerospace industry itself was changing. Avro became part of British aerospace, working alongside programs such as the Hawk, Jaguar, and Tornado. But the greatest challenge still lay ahead. In the 1990s, a decision was made to modernize the Nimrod. The result was the MRA-4 program. It was intended to deliver a state-of-the-art maritime patrol aircraft. New wings, modern avionics, advanced mission systems. But the reality proved far more difficult. Each aircraft required extensive rebuilding. Old fuselages did not align perfectly with new structures. Costs rose, schedules slipped, complexity increased. At the same time, serious safety concerns emerged. In 2006, the loss of Nimrod 15230 over Afghanistan shocked the nation. The investigation revealed critical design vulnerabilities, fuel systems, heat sources, and the risks of aging aircraft. The program came under intense scrutiny. And in 2010, the decision was made. The Nimrod MRA-4 program was cancelled. Aircraft, almost complete, were scrapped. A capability, decades in the making, was lost. For a time, Britain had no dedicated maritime patrol aircraft, a gap in defense capability. Eventually, that gap would be filled by the P-8 Poseidon, a modern aircraft built on new foundations. But the story of Nimrod remains important. It is a story of innovation, of adaptation, and of the challenges of maintaining complex systems over time. From the legacy of the Comet to the end of the program, Nimrod stands as a reminder that in aviation, success is never guaranteed, and that even the most capable aircraft must evolve or be replaced. From the earliest days of flight to the jet-powered giants of the Cold War, Avro's legacy continues to inspire. If you've enjoyed this film, please subscribe and be part of the journey. You can explore more stories like this by searching PhotoART History on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Follow, subscribe, and share as we continue to bring history to life. Thank you for watching.